Okay, thanks, Fiona. Welcome everyone to the May 2025 Lochaber Area Committee meeting. I think we have two apologies for absence, Councillor Baldry and Councillor Grafton. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Yes, I have a declaration of transparency for agenda item 4, which is Kinlochleven Associated School Group, as both of my children attend Kinlochleven High School, and my wife is a member of the parent council at the high school as well. But having applied the test, I will remain in the meeting during consideration of that item and take part fully in the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. So moving on to the first item, which is item 3, the Police Scotland Local Committee Performance Report. And good morning to Chief Inspector Donna Allen. And I think that's it. Good morning, Donna, and thank you very much for joining us.
Morning. Morning, thank you. Said the report's been circulated with the paper, so it's a report covering the 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025. So the local policing priorities remain unchanged through the period, and the statistics reported reflect the wider South Highland area. So starting off with probably, I think just in the comments here, there's just to highlight the change in policing management. So Ross McCartney has now moved on to cover the area commander role in the Western Isles, and he's replaced by Katie Duncan. Now, I'm sure most of you would have had previous experience of Katie when Ross was covering previously, so I'm delighted to have her in the team as the local area inspector for Lochaber. So just within the content of the report, road safety and road crime, there is a slight increase in road traffic fatalities, with an increase of 4 to 5. So we'll continue to work with our colleagues in roads policing around us. We're fortunate to have a dedicated roads policing resource based in Fort William to allow us some support in respect of this. The increase in drink and drug driving offences remains a concern for me. It is replicated elsewhere and remains a target for us and our colleagues within roads policing to try and address that. But I think there's a significant education requirement around road users as far as this goes, and particularly around drug driving. I think the message in terms of drink driving has long been out there, but drug driving, I feel, is something that we need to continue to have a focus on in terms of education. Moving on into antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence. So we do work with our partners, particularly in respect of youth offending, which was obviously a matter of local concern in Lochaber. A concerted effort has resulted in a number of reports to the Procurator Fiscal and Children's Reporter. This proactivity will continue, as I know how much of an impact this behaviour has on our communities locally. The acquisitive crime, we've seen a significant reduction in house breakings, which may reflect previous efforts to target repeat offenders. Theft by shoplifting does show a significant increase, which again is reflected with the wider picture, and we are working with premises to identify and report those responsible. I don't believe, drilling down into these figures, that Lochaber is particularly figuring highly in these. We've one premise out with Lochaber that does figure very highly and takes quite a few of those figures. Moving on into the section around protecting vulnerable people. There's an increase in rape offences reported. We've a dedicated local and national resource in respect of detecting these crimes and supporting victims. They do proactively manage inquiries into individuals who are the greatest risk, and this activity in itself identifies new victims, which will increase the figures. But as you will imagine, that this kind of offending will remain a national priority. We do have a slight decrease in missing persons, but these can remain some of the most challenging and time-consuming inquiries that we deal with, particularly with the most vulnerable people who may not actually want to be found. So it really is a huge resource. Not going to say issue, but it does take a lot of our resource to deal with our missing persons. So any amount of reduction within that's always welcome to me. For serious and organised crime, drug dealing remains a concern for communities, and whilst we still don't see the OCG involvement in South Highland that is evident elsewhere, we have had successful enforcement activity within the Lochaber area, and we will continue along those lines. And finally, in terms of the priorities, counter-terrorism, high-profile peace, nationalists can be seen from recent events. Locally, our focus remains on identifying those who may be vulnerable to radicalisation, and education remains the main focus of that work. Overall, Lochaber is relatively typical of the picture within the N division. It remains a safe place to live and work, and we'll continue to focus on these priorities going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Donna. I don't know, I think your camera was off. I don't know if you can turn it on.
Apologies.
That's okay, not a problem. Thank you very much. It was, yeah, wasn't sure. Does anyone have any questions for Donna? And thank you very much for the report. Anyone have any questions? Andrew.
Thank you, Donna, for your comprehensive report. I have a question that's not covered in the information that you provided, but is extremely topical at the moment. We're enjoying this fine Lochaber weather, and your colleagues in Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have continued to issue warnings about the extreme hazard of wildfires and requested people not to have open fires in the area. Very noticeable when I drove back from Fort William late on Friday night, the number of people that had open fires between Fort William and Kinlochleven. And I know from previous experience, when I've challenged people on this, that you tend to get a torrent of abuse, or they just look at you blankly. Can you tell us what action you think from a police service that you think local communities can take to challenge somewhat selfish behaviour in the circumstances and encourage people to behave responsibly, and what action can your own officers take as well to reduce the risk of unintentional wildfires being caused by this kind of behaviour?
So in terms of the first steps would always be around education, is what we would always seek to do in terms of that, but accepting that the warnings are out there. So I'd be looking for, if people have got concerns regarding people setting fires, bonfires, whatever it is that they actually have, that they do call in and report those matters. And as far as we can, but what I'll take away from here is also if I can do some work with the fire service around perhaps some joint patrols. But it would be good to get a focus on, and there will be, the local officers will know the areas where people are likely to gather for camping, etc. And we can look at if there's anything that we can do as the next stage for this piece of work, because I appreciate the community concerns, because it can impact so closely to their homes.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks, Andrew, for that question, because it is a big issue. And also at the end of the month, hopefully, I think we'll be having some seasonal access rangers starting in the team. So hopefully they can work closely with you as well, especially around wildfires, littering, and camping. That would be good.
The end of this month that the access rangers are in post.
Hopefully, yes. And then, so Sarah and then Thomas.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I cannot see you. Yes.
Donna.
Thank you very much, Donna. That's right. I'm trying to see you. Thank you. Sorry. I've got two questions. One, to extend a little bit on what Councillor Baxter was saying, which is not just about wildfires, but when there is bad behaviour in the community, like littering, that sort of thing. What advice would you give to members of the community who choose to challenge some visitors for their behaviour? Are they putting themselves at risk? I've had a few members from different communities who have faced very unpleasant reactions from from visitors dropping litter, for example. And the other question, slightly different, antisocial behaviour. Is there a way of dealing with it faster? Because when it comes from a neighbour, for example, I've had complaints from constituents who say they give up reporting to the police because procedures take so long to come to a resolution. So that's two questions.
I'll probably start with the second one then, around it. Again, we have a process in terms of how we can deal with this, whether that be dealing with partner agencies such as housing, or whether there is a criminal element and it does go to crime report. Once we would try to get the crime report submitted just as soon as we possibly can, because there are timescales that we need to keep to. But once that report has gone in, it will just then ultimately have to work its way through the crime report, the Crown system as such, to decide whether any action is going to be taken. So I'm not sure there is any way of making it quicker, really. And then the antisocial behaviour, ultimately, I remain slightly old-fashioned in that there is absolutely nothing wrong with challenging people around their behaviour there and then. But should anybody feel threatened in any way, then that should be the subject to a report. That whether there's criminality as such, or whether it's just a warning that needs to be administered. But people shouldn't be afraid to highlight these issues to us.
Thanks, Donna. Thomas.
Hey, thanks, Donna. I've got two questions, and both of them I have only just been sort of informed of them myself in the last few days. First one was there was vandalism at the West End car park last weekend, and it was an employer that I met, and his digger had been vandalised. When they came in the Monday, they find it vandalised, and then they report it on the Monday morning to be told that it'll be Thursday before somebody can come and see it or take a statement from them. And, they can leave the machine sitting there doing idle. So they just said, forget it. Is that sort of atypical where somebody phones in, it's a mission critical piece of machinery that they've got, and then they're told somebody will come and see you in several days.
Yeah.
I believe the following night there was more vandalism in that area, and I suppose it asks the question of what are we doing about patrols and basically catching the culprits who it appears that everybody knows who they are and they're running amok in the town.
I'll take this when we have a look at it, but in terms of that particular process, it is because it goes into our colleagues in C3 and they assess the threat and harm and generally make further appointments. I would prefer if they just put it to local officers there and then. So I'll have a look at that one in particular because that's an area of concern for me.
Okay, and the second one was about, I live in Terlundy and I'm on the cycle track, and last week I became aware of the fact that with some members of the travelling community had parked on the rescue helicopter landing pad. And this led to helicopters being unable to land. I believe there was 2 incidents, although I never saw either of them, but I believe at one point a helicopter had to land not on the landing pad, but in an adjacent piece of ground. And the equipment that our ambulance people have to use now with the big hydraulic stretchers and that, and the situation was sorted out, but how are we going to prevent that from happening again, basically, and how do we move members of the public who, because there's no gate at the moment, they're wandering into it and setting up camp. I believe there was people camping in it as well, but in a tent. How do we prevent this from happening? Because if there's a real mission critical thing happening, we need people taken away quickly or brought in to get treatment quickly. We can't have that situation. It just shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Do you know if that one had been highlighted at all prior to the incident happening where the helicopter couldn't land?
I know that this happened about a week ago, but
let me have a look at that one. But maybe that we need to work with partners as well around that. If there's any kind of signage, etc. Has the gate been removed?
The gate, there was a gate and it's been
Mhm.
removed. Why, I don't know, but there is a gate removed. There should be more signage saying, you know, this is an emergency facility, please keep away from it, etc., etc. I feel it's something we need to nip in the bud before something,
Yeah.
a real situation develops.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'll take that one away as well and have a look at it just to see if there's anything in terms of the police that we can do, and then we'll like, I don't actually know who owns the HLS, if it's local.
It was a local building firm. I think it still belongs to them below there, or at least one of them is still. One died relatively recently, but it's privately owned and leased out.
Is this the bit at the back of the Mountain Rescue?
No, it's at Carr's Corner as you're coming into Fort William on the
Right, yeah.
on the left-hand side of the road.
Yeah. Okay. I will come back to you with that with a response.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't think we have any further questions. So thank you very much, Donna, and for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
So the next item 4 is Kinlochleven High School Association School Group Overview, and we've got Mary McDonald that's joined us. Thank you very much for coming along this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Yep, good morning, Chair. Welcome from a very sunny sky as well, so lovely to have this good weather. So, Chair, this was the report that had been due to be considered and noted at your January meeting, but we decided to pull it until the May committee, which will allow me to give some updates in terms of where we are with both the primary school inspection from Education Scotland and the secondary schools inspection. It was quite unusual that the head teacher had 2 inspections within a very short period of time. Sorry, Councillor Baxter.
No, I wasn't interrupting you. That was just in
sorry.
preparation for once you finished.
Thank you. So as you are aware, with our ASG reports, it gives us some information for you to note in terms of Education Scotland inspections, school roles, and the attendance and attainment profiles of our schools. Obviously, with the small number of pupils within the schools, within the Kinlochleven ASG, a lot of the information isn't actually available to us, so that it allows the confidentiality due to the small number of pupils within each stage. So really just going through the report, it does give us the information on attainment, which is in tables 7 for both primary and the secondary schools. The pupil destinations for Kinlochleven High, again, with the small cohort of pupils within Kinlochleven High, it is sometimes difficult to see if there's a pattern emerging. If we look at the destination of pupils for higher education between 2021 to 22-23, it had gone from 44.83% to 23.08% for higher education, but an increase in those going into further education, where training and employment remained pretty stable there. I think in terms of, for the Kinlochleven ASG, obviously in terms of the primary schools, we've had the decision to keep Jura open, and I saw the recent two pupils being interviewed. I think it was BBC Alaba, who spoke very highly of their school, and I'm delighted that the school is to remain open. I'll leave it for there. I do have further updates just in terms of staffing and where we are in terms of the re-inspection for the primary school. I say Lauren Hannah, the head teacher, had hoped to join us this morning, but she has a meeting with the collaborative lead officer in terms of preparation, because Education Scotland inspectors are due back at the primary school week beginning the 27th of May, and will be there from the Monday to the Wednesday. So Lauren's working with the collaborative lead officer in preparation for that. So she would have been happy to join us this morning, but was otherwise engaged. I don't know if you want me to go on just in terms of where we are with staffing, or I'm happy to take questions at the moment in terms of the clustering arrangements as well for the 4 primary schools.
Thanks, Mary. Has anyone got any questions they want to ask now, or for Mary to carry on with? No, I think I'm happy for you to carry on.
Happy to carry on, yes. So I'm pleased, well, to say the inspectors are coming back to the primary school 27th to the 29th of May. The authority has given a commitment that the primary deputy head will be non-class committed, which obviously gives her a lot more capacity to continue to work on the points that were made from the last inspection. And what we're hoping is that in a couple of weeks' time, it will give us a very clear focus on what should be in the school improvement plan for next session, and hopefully be able to report on improvements that have been made there. There was also a commitment to 2 full-time primary class teachers. The current teachers have applied and interviews are being planned. So again, what I feel is important is that hopefully that will give the primary school the consistency and stability to take forward the improvements that are required there. There was also, they were able to advertise for a full-time permanent children's services worker. It was advertised internally, and unfortunately there were no applicants, but it has been advertised again externally, which went out on the 6th of May. So it should be next week, the closing date for that. So Lauren's hopeful that we'll get some applicants for that. The authority is also supporting 2 members of staff at the high school to get full registration for maths. They're both science teachers, and they're being funded so that hopefully that will allow maths, for them to teach the maths and the broad general education as well as their science subject. They have been given some additionality in science to support the vacancies in maths, and biology is to be interviewed. So there's interviews coming up for the biology teacher there as well. And again, the high school's action plan, as a result of its inspection, they're working closely with Mark Jones, who's the secondary collaborative lead officer, and the action plan will very much feed into the school improvement plan for next session, which will be published in September, so after the summer holidays. So that's just a wee update on where we are there. In terms of the quad for Glencoe, St Bride's, Ballachulish and Dura, as you will know, almost 3 years ago in August coming up, we had 1 head teacher for the 4 primary schools. And Malcolm McGregor then left to take on a new role, and Mary Evans has been acting head for the 4 primary schools. I was obviously waiting until a decision was made about Dura to try and make a decision as to whether we go back to the 2 clusters that were in place previously or to continue with the quad. So I've spoken to Mary, who's the acting head, and she's very supportive of continuing with the 4 schools. I also met with the chairs of the parent councils, and I suppose each school had slightly different views, but I feel it's been working very well. And my kind of view at the moment is that the quad should continue with 1 head teacher, which will be advertised. But I've just last week received some emails which I'll need to take into consideration as well now from parent council representatives. So I'll have a look at those. But I say it's almost been in place for 3 years now and seems to be working very well, with teams really working closely across the 4 schools, which is good to see. So I'm happy to take any questions now, Chair, if there are any.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that comprehensive update. I think Andrew, you had your hand up, and then Sarah.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad, Marion, that you covered the outcome of the recent inspection report for Kinlochleven High School, because I was surprised that there was no mention of it in the report. And any constituent going online would think that and looking at the report, would think that Highland Council is not addressing those issues or completely swept them under the carpet. So maybe we could have an explanation why there is no statement from Highland Council within the report, because it's it's seldom that our constituents or even the press will go onto the YouTube channel to see the outcome of this meeting, and as a result, many people would be completely oblivious of what you just outlined. I'm glad, and may I thank you and other education officers that you met so quickly with myself as local councillor and parent council representatives immediately after that report was issued, and that you gave very strong commitments from the education department to assist the high school, and that was provided in a writing to the parent council. And you've outlined some of those things today, including making the deputy head of the primary school non-class committed, and providing full-time contracts for the class teachers. Some of us would say, what's taken so long? Because in fact, if those actions had been taken many years ago, because parent council and successive head teachers were asking for assistance like that, we would not have ended up in the position of having the report that we had. I'm grateful that you've given an update to staffing for the next academic session, but could you update members as to why the school hasn't been told their allocation of probationary teachers for next year, where other schools have been told of their allocation? Because my understanding is that until there is confirmation of whether they've been successful in securing probationary teachers for both maths and physics subjects, that the head teacher is unable to move to or have a clear indication of what recruitment needs there are for the next session. I think that's all my questions on the high school. I would like, before I move on to other issues, just to note our support for Lauren, the head teacher there, and all of her staff. I don't think the recent report is any reflection of her leadership. She's only been in place for just over a year, and she's addressing many of the deep-seated issues that have been allowed to build up over successive years as a result. I think, and I know the parent council believe, and most parents would agree with us, that she is doing a sterling job at transforming the school, and I hope that she is given all the support possible by the council to achieve that. Can I just turn to the figures relating to our primary schools? And I note your comments about not being able to provide full figures because of confidentiality, but I can't get my head around the figures on page 20, where we're told that Ballachulish Primary School with a roll of 24, we can't have their figures for attainment, whereas Kinlochleven Primary School, that has 6 less pupils in that particular year, we are provided with their attainment scores. So there seems to be a discrepancy there. And where school roll sizes are so small to provide those figures, would it be appropriate for those schools to be collated together and we have the overall picture for that school cluster or that group of schools, so that we have some indication of attainment? Because otherwise, to be quite frank, if we're only provided the figures for Kinlochleven Primary School, we have no indication of how attainment is across the whole ASG, and maybe we need to look at providing figures for all of the primary schools in the ASG bundled together, although that would obviously mask particular local circumstances or issues. I think that's everything, Chair, that I have to ask at the moment.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll try and I think you've raised 2 important points about the format of the reports that are currently being presented to members. And I will certainly take your comments back to consider as a way forward to provide that detailed information. If there has been an Education Scotland inspection since the report last came to members, I think it would be worthwhile including that in the information that is provided. And I take on board also your point about perhaps having an ASG attainment data and attendance, which for our small ASGs such as Kinlochleven would probably be helpful. Just thinking as a way forward, there's obviously a restructure going on currently within education and learning, and new roles should be created and folks appointed. So I think that's something that would certainly be worthwhile taking forward as part of that, Andrew. So I'll certainly see what we can do to improve, I think, the information that is in the reports for our smaller ASGs. In terms of probationers, I actually had that discussion with Lauren just on Friday. I knew the date myself for our primary probationers, which is going to be in the 19th of May, that the authority is made aware of the number of probationers and where they live. The probationers themselves are then given a week, I believe, to confirm or otherwise that they're still happy to go to that authority that they've been placed in. So we then have that slight delay before we can get in touch with the probationers and then inform the primary schools. But in terms of secondary, I know it's slightly different, and Lauren did raise this question with me on Friday, which I'm going to be looking into as well, as to why some, I think in some authorities as well, I'm aware secondary schools appear to know who their probationers are, and certainly Lauren was asking that question, so I'd already said I would pick that up, Andrew, so that's fine. Just trying to think if there was anything else within your comments. But I think that the two important things, I think it is important that we take forward your suggestion about inspection reports and looking at perhaps ASG attainment data, because certainly that feeds into the high school and where we would expect, the high school with the cohort coming up from the primaries. And I take on board as well any discrepancies in the figures. Sometimes it does just depend on particular numbers within. I know it gives us the 1, 4 and 7 number of pupils rather than the whole school. The whole school roll. But again, I'll look into that, and I think there's certainly some improvements that can be made so that these reports are more meaningful for you all. So happy to take those forward for you. Chair, any other? Sarah, were you going to?
Thank you. I think Sarah has a question or
a couple of questions. Yes. Barry, thank you very much. I can see you.
That's fine.
I was at the Parents' Council meeting when the report was read to parents. So I'm very pleased to hear what I've heard today, that there's action, there's an action plan, things are happening. Would it be possible to have more regular updates so we can follow this up? There's a few things, however, which I want to still check. Do we have evidence there is support for a proper strategy in the school to support children with special needs, but also to stretch more able children able to raise the attainment levels from both sides of the ability spectrum? The other thing I want to ask, where are we with short-term contracts? Because I think it's been a disease in South Lochaber the last 10, 15 years. So, and I know that it was an issue in Kinlochleven. And Kinlochleven High School is a small school, which is great. But small schools, particularly small secondary schools, also have their disadvantages. And one of them is that when a member of staff is away or goes and cannot be replaced for a while, it has a greater impact on the school than in a bigger school. So do we have any figures or data to find out how much teaching is delivered in the school by non-specialist teachers because of a member of staff not being replaced? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll certainly take on board your request for regular updates with regard to the action plan. I actually wanted to concur with what Andrew had said in his comments about the standard of leadership that the high school and the primary are now receiving from from Lauren, which is reflected in both letters from Education Scotland to the parents. For the primary school, it actually states that the newly appointed head teacher and deputy head teacher have made significant and positive impact to the school in a short period of time. And for the high school, the newly appointed head teacher is making a positive start to providing strategic direction in how to improve standards. So I think Lauren has come in and has given a very clear steer in that, works extremely well with collaborative lead officers and other officers within the authority, and has a very robust way of dealing with issues, and has open and honest conversations with officers at the centre as well. So as I say, she's going to be working at the moment looking at the primary school re-inspection, and we'll obviously have to take on board whatever the inspectors say when they come back in a couple of weeks' time. With regard to the secondary school, the action plan, I say, it will feed into the school improvement plan for next year, which will come out in September. The standards and quality report, all schools have to have those published in June, and that will give a reflection on progress made over this current session. So I think it will be important once those are published, Sarah, that perhaps members, if they would like to receive a copy of that, then that's made available to you as well, because that will show where the school thinks it currently is and the progress that it's made. Because with school improvement plans, although there's certain things for the school itself, there will also be local authority priorities that will be in that plan. But I can certainly, make sure that you're kept up to date. And again, with regard to the additional support for learning, support and stretch, and I think that's also reflected in the primary school in particular. It's about that pace and challenge for certain children. One of the comments is that children should be provided more opportunities to be independent in their learning, and that quality and consistency of learning and teaching across the school. So again, I very much take on board, I think, the number of pupils we have in our schools currently, and I know that from working with the West, the North and the Mid at the moment. I would think there's perhaps we need to look at our training again and empowering staff within the schools to understand the needs of the children and providing them with the skills to ensure that all children are able to make progress at their level and receive the support that they require to have a positive experience of education, and so that the impact and attainment within our schools is also more positive than it has been. And again, I think within the restructure that's about to happen, there'll be more teams working much more closely with our schools. And I would very much hope that rather than operational and strategic being separate, that will all come together. And so it gives us a much better opportunity to work really, really closely with all of our schools, primary and secondary, to bring about that raising of attainment that we need, but supporting those who find learning more challenging than others do. So I think it's about upskilling everybody, and for example, even having a children's support worker that we're hoping to appoint for Kinlochleven, that also makes a big difference in our support for our families and helping young people to be at school and to engage in their learning. So it's looking at other sectors as well and other partners who can support work in schools. And I'm really, really hoping that with the new structure that everybody's working much more closely together to support everybody, staff and pupils and families in our schools. Again, you've mentioned the short-term contracts, and I think that was recognised in the meeting that we had with Andrew and the chair of the Parent Council, and that's why there was the commitment to the 2 permanent full-time members of staff. And I say we're very hopeful that the current teachers who are at the primary school will be successful in staying there. I don't have the data that you've asked for on how much teaching has been delivered by the non-specialists, but again, I can get in touch with Lauren and try and find that out for you, Sarah.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you for highlighting the strong leadership of
Lauren.
schools.
Yep.
And let's make sure we give the 2 head teachers all the support that they need Just one more thing, it's that I think the school was not inspected for 15 years. Are there any signs in future that it could happen again? Because it's quite worrying that schools do not get inspected for 15 up to 20 years.
Yes. Education Scotland, I know, have given a commitment to Scottish Government to be really getting to the schools that haven't been inspected for such a long time. Because I did actually speak to somebody from Education Scotland when Lauren was being faced by a second inspection in just a matter of a few months, to see if it was any way we could give her a bit longer. But that was the message I got, that Education Scotland have a commitment. So we're very, very conscious of the number of schools who are overdue an inspection. And I have to say that schools this session that I've been involved with, who have been through the inspection process, have actually found it to be very beneficial, and have felt supported as well as challenged from Education Scotland inspectors, and have been provided with a very clear focus on where improvement needs to be made. So I hope that that continues, and that the inspection process is used as a way of improving outcomes for our young people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ferry.
Thank you.
I don't think we've got any other questions. So yeah, thanks for the report and taking those actions forward that have been raised. I think members were asked to scrutinise and note the content of the report, which we've done. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sun.
Bye for now. Bye.
So moving on to item 5, which is the Area Roads Capital Programme update. I think we've got Kristen online, and possibly Tracy Ori might be joining us. Is that correct, Kristen? Yes. Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Tracy and Kristen, and thanks for the report and joining us.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
I think Kristen's going to present the report, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. My understanding was that you had invited the Strategic Chair, Ken Gowans, to attend your meeting today, but unfortunately he has not been able to, so he has submitted his apologies for that. So if there was anything that you were intending to ask of him, then I'll try to respond if I'm able to.
Yep. Thanks, Tracy. And yep, I'll hand over to you, Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, members. The paper that I've submitted today was a Area Roads Capital Programme update for 2024-2025. So I had asked members to note the final budget allocation for Lochaber for 24-25, note the works completed on the approved list to date, and note the additional works identified and prioritised throughout the year. So item 6 was the overall budget allocation for Lochaber, and that was from our baseline capital budget and also the strategic capital allocation and structures. So that gave us an overall of 1.9 million for 24-25. And on Appendix 1, you can see column 5 is all the status completed schemes, with column 4 the committee approval schemes that was in 23rd of January 2024, and 4 schemes that we've managed to programme and complete the last sort of quarter, and that was really due to identifying these roads that had additional, they deteriorated over the winter, the safety defects amounting to, it was beyond sort of cold patching and temporary measures, and they were prioritised to push through. Luckily, over the last few months, so Mora on the C1150, that was an 850 metre overlay. That was a section of road that the Community Council and various complaints over a large number of years. It just kind of stopped at the church there from the very start of the Mora Brackera Road. Down a Breck, I've spoke about that one previously. That was a 300-metre section road that was subsiding, and the Errol of Inverness Road is the top end of Inverlochie. That was quite a complex scheme to deliver due to the railway station bridge, and there's only one access into Inverlochie village and one out, so complete road closure there for over sort of 2-3 nights. And Farm Foods Junction, we managed to work with Bear Scotland while they were delivering their scheme at the high school. It was a section of the junction had been deteriorating for quite a long time. It had been on the programme for a number of years, but again, complex to deliver due to Fort William's road infrastructure. So that was the update for today. I don't think there was anything else that was sort of asked. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Kristen. Yeah, great to see some of these, the work that's being done. Do we have any questions? Sarah?
It's not a question, just to say thank you. I mean, the last 4 years I've really seen changes. It's not, there's more money for roads, but I do get that, but there's also a different way of working, and you and your team coming into the communities when the communities have asked and they wanted to report problems which have been fixed. So it's been very, very helpful. So let's carry on working together. Thank you.
It's good.
Thanks, Sarah and Kristen. Andrew?
Thank you, Kristen. On the basis that the capital allocation for this year is £1.9 million for Lochaber roads, how many outstanding, what is the total value of outstanding works that are on the list of a road repair that requires capital funding is still outstanding? And I might have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, I'm basing. I've actually not quite got the answer to this year's final budget allocation due to there's a committee meeting in May. I don't actually have the date for that, and that's going to be our strategic allocation. So if that changes depending on what's going to be submitted to that committee, then that will change my forecasting for this year. So on the basis of that, what I presented in the January committee, and that had our 4 baseline schemes, and then there was a TBC lines underneath that. So that would then fall into, depending on what we get, will be what we'll deliver. There can always be changes. I mean, I was out in Noidert on Wednesday, and there's sections in Noidert that is not on this capital delivery programme that needs to go on. So, there is always changes, just as what we view roads and what members write in, community councils. So in answer to your question, I will just have a quick look what was submitted in January, and yeah, there was over £1 million on the capital programme between sort of urban and rural roads. And then there's the road operators, the DLO as they're called. They've got surfacing schemes going out as well, starting next week in Cool Bay. So that takes in probably up to sort of £500,000, and then hot patch and drainage, storm damages. So yeah. Do you mean, Andrew, sorry, do you mean the schemes that are on the below the line list?
Yes, so if we've been allocated £1.9 million for a capital programme this year, what can you not afford within that budget to work on? What is the total value of that? And to assist you looking at the report now that I've got it up, you identified £7.9 million worth of area capital works required. We've been given 1.9. So that's £6 million worth of works that cannot be allocated or completed as of today's date. And I'm interested with what my ward colleague said about the improvement over the last 4 years, because when I left the council in 2022, the current outstanding amount of capital works that we could not complete in any one financial year from memory was about £4 million. So I'm not entirely sure where we're seeing the improvement that others think that we might be having, because there's a substantial backlog as identified in January of work still to be undertaken, and that is why the committee requested Councillor Gowans to come. And I note that Tracy Uri, as the appropriate officer, is here and has offered to answer questions. But the reason we invited Councillor Gowans was that in many ways this is a political discussion and not an operational discussion. It's about actually having the discussion with the appropriate committee chair about the wider Lochaber issues. And I wouldn't expect an officer, even of the skills of Tracy Uri, to comment on the political aspects of the resource allocation.
Hand over to Kristen and or Tracy. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, I could probably start, Andrew. The 4 years ago, you know, there's a lot that's changed since COVID, and you know, there's a lot of deterioration. There's a lot more tourism. We had obviously the Corran Ferry outage as well, where we really struggled to do any road improvements on the peninsula due to traffic management problems. So there is a number of reasons why the cost has changed, and also I think I kind of wrote that as well in the appendix back in January. The list that previously was available didn't take into contractor costs for traffic management, white lining. There could be ironworks repairs that are required before surfacing and overlay starts. We could have culverts that are collapsing. So the figure that was around 4 years ago, I don't think was a very real reflective figure of what is needed within Lochaber. And that's all I can probably comment on operationally side of it.
Tracy, thanks, Kristen. Tracy. Oh, we can't hear you.
My apologies, I was on mute there. I was just going to get some figures which might have assisted. As you say, and thank you very much, Councillor Baxter, for your comments, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on political decisions that are taken with regard to the distribution and allocation of the budget. But what I can advise, and to support Kristen in what she has said, is that we have seen significant improvement in investment in the roads over the last 3 years. However, the backlog figure that remains outstanding is still pretty substantial at about, well, just over £200 million worth of work is required. And the steady state figure that we need to be investing in roads to make sure that annually there is no further deterioration in roads is about £33 million a year. And we are just about keeping pace with that at the moment over the last few years with that additional investment. About £21 million is going into capital structural works, and just over £16 million is going into the revenue side of things. So we are keeping pace. There has been more investment than there was, and I'm sure you will recall that prior to the recent additional investment that has been allocated for roads, we were only investing about £7.2 million per year. So there's quite a challenge there. There's still a backlog figure. We are doing better than we have been doing previously, but a figure of £4 million 4 years ago, if you take into account inflation and other factors, as Kristen's advised you in terms of traffic management and other issues, I could understand why it's increased to £7 million. I'm not sure if those additional figures help you or not, but hopefully they provide a little bit more context.
It does indeed, and your spin is worthy of any politician. Even if I accept the 4 year ago figure of £4.5 million, and then you add inflation and additional contractor costs. If someone was being generous, that means we're at a standstill position in terms of the total costs of backlog, and that we're not in reality addressing that backlog of repairs. And I note, Kristen, what you say about the Corran Ferry and the difficulties with addressing or undertaking roadworks across the other side of the loch. But I look at your below the line list in Appendix 1 from the January report, and we have North Ballachulish, Kinlochleven to Glencoe, the Glen Etive Road, Kinlochhorn, Mora, Cool Bay. None of those were affected by the Corran Ferry outage, and many of those are, from recollection, particularly those on the B863, have been on the list with unallocated capital funding for some time. Can I say again that I really do think that Councillor Gowans needs to attend a future committee a meeting of this, so that we can discuss this in public with him. He has plenty of time to sort out his diary for either our August and I think the November meeting after that, and can we make that request again to him, and I'm sure that he will be able to accommodate our request.
Thank you, Andrew. Sarah?
I'm a bit confused. I'm just going to repeat what I've heard in very simple and plain English. So there's been circumstances the last 4 years, including inflation, that has made work more difficult for us. The second thing is that councillors and communities have been working hard to identify more problems. So as a result of that, the list has got bigger, but it's not a bad thing. You know, that's there's nothing wrong about being honest, Councillor Baxter. And the last thing, there's nothing political about it. The only political choice I can see in it is that the current administration has chosen to put more money on roads, and that's something we should welcome. More work will be done. Yes, the backlog is maybe bigger, but we are going in the right direction, and there's still a lot of work to be done. I accept that, but let's celebrate and stop being negative, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you for patronising me, Councillor Fanny. I wasn't being negative, I'm being realistic. You just need to go around our communities, and people are not seeing the improvements that you're suggesting. Tracy Uri indicated that that I think it was the £200 million figure, which is substantial, and has not been addressed by the Scottish Government in terms of providing additional funding for road maintenance to our councils. My recollection is that in England, the Westminster Government has put a focus into providing additional funding to councils in England for road repairs to try and address an equally appalling situation south of the border. I recognise that the current administration has put additional resources into this. I don't deny that, but we are kidding ourselves if it's actually addressing the substantial backlog. And I can tell you from having been a councillor since 2012, that list is no more substantially long from when it was when I was first elected as a councillor. It is there for everyone to see, and I do think that it would be worthwhile for us to have an open and honest discussion with Councillor Gowans about the challenges that we're facing in Lochaber about our road repairs.
Thank you, Andrew. Hopefully, well, given your campaigning to run in Hollywood, hopefully you'll be able to sort out some of those funding issues. Not Hollywood, Holyrood. You'll be able to sort out some of those financial the support for road repairs when you're an MSP. So we look forward to that, Andrew. And I don't think we've got any more questions. So thank you very much, Kristen and Tracy, for the report. We've noted points 1 to 3, and keep up the good work. Have a good day. Thank you. Oh, hang on, Thomas. Did you? Oh, you're mute. You're on mute, Thomas.
Sorry, I pressed my button so late, but I just wanted to come in. I have a degree of sympathy from Andrew's point of view that we need a bigger slice of the cake. I'll get that out there first, but I just want to highlight one item, and it's not even in my ward, and it's very rare that I make a remark about Ward 11, but last weekend I had the need to drive all the way to Kinlochleven, right to the very end of it, and I was impressed by how the road has improved. You know, there's obviously been a lot of money spent, and it's a work in progress. As you get to the end, it's still a bit rough and ready, but it's pretty obvious that there's work ongoing. And having been there 2 or 3 years ago, it was like a section from the Scottish 6 Days, to be honest, where you try to get to Kinlochleven. I just thought, for the record, you know, it was good to see that when we do turn up at a road and start to improve it. It's 25 miles of single track road. There's a big improvement on it, and I was impressed with it. But I do feel we need a big slice of the cake to fix a lot more problems that we have. But Kinlochleven, it's on its way to be complete. And I was utterly amazed when I got to the end of it. There is car parking there. I had friends that were wanting to walk on to Noida, and I was just letting them off. The car park was completely full. There must have been between 24 and 30 cars parked in the car park, which is incredible, having driven over there quite regular for nearly 40 years. It's amazing how busy that road's got. But good to see progress on it, and maybe when the last little section be finished is maybe the only question I would have. But we do need more money to fix a lot more problems.
Thanks, Thomas, and for that. So again, thanks, Kristen and Tracy. And yeah, we'll all keep working on this. Have a good day. Moving on, we're moving on to item 6, which is the Corran Ferry update, and we've got Murray online, but Richard Fortius is joining us in the room. And just it's fine. So thanks very much, Richard. And so we are having an update on Corran Ferry operations and infrastructure improvement scheme and the new electric vessels. So thanks for joining us, Richard and Murray, and I'll hand over to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Chair, members. Good to see everybody. Yeah, so this is an update on a couple of things, both the Corran Ferry operations and some key points of note around that, and also the Corran Ferry infrastructure improvement scheme and the Corran Ferry new electric vessel project. So as far as operations go, the points in the report are fairly self-explanatory and all really for noting. Key issues in particular, I guess, is the refit for the Maiden Glen Cool relief vessel, the oldest of the two vessels, which is currently underway at the moment, and weekly update reports are going to all stakeholders on that, and the one went out just last week at the end of the week. So that's that's there to be referred to with the latest update there. We're about halfway through that refit. In addition to that, perhaps draw your attention to the flip boat issue in section 10, where we're that's an ongoing project, trying to seek the best funding model for that upgrade for the true transfer vessel, largely driven by the age of the existing boat, but also the safety issues described in the report and in the previous briefing that was circulated to members. Also slipway repairs, which are upcoming. The report says in 11.2 that the designs are at an advanced stage. Well, that is correct, and we're trying to get that going now that we're into this time of year when weather is more inclement, and we should be able to proceed with those repairs. But the key point at 11.2 is that we will work very hard to consult closely with neighbours and stakeholders on that in advance and throughout the works, which are expected to be done, well, they will be done overnight to avoid disruption to the ferry service. They're expected to take in total no longer than 2 weeks to do the 2 weeks of nights to do the Lochaber surfacing repairs to the concrete slipway. The other point I could mention is the marshalling, point 13. So when the report was written, interviews were to take place mid-April, so that happened, and the marshals are in place. We managed to get them trained and up and running before the Scottish 6-day trial, so that was a great benefit at that time, and now that we're getting steadily busier, they're gaining more experience as well, and that's going to help generally as we go through the summer, hopefully. And it is a trial, as we said, but it already seems to be an improvement. So I'm just going to pause there. I'm not sure if the Chair wants questions on operations now, or I could just introduce Murray to press on and give the full update on the infrastructure improvement scheme and the new electric vessel. It's probably maybe good to do that before we then just maybe invite general questions afterwards to give Murray a fair crack to update everybody.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, thanks, Murray.
Yeah, good morning, members. Yeah, thanks for that, Richard. Yes, so I'm pleased to say that things are progressing really well with the procurement strategy for the new electric vessel, and a report is now being prepared and will be presented to members at the Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 29th of May for their approval. So the recommendation, the preferred approach that the Council is proposing to members for the delivery of the new Corran ferry to align with the readiness of the infrastructure, which will be completed in May 2027, and then the shore power, the electric power required to charge the vessel, will be scheduled for completion in September 2028. So we aim to deliver the ferry after that infrastructure and shore power is in place. So the report that's been taken to members is to maintain the close collaboration that we've already got with CMAL through a partnership arrangement. So this will involve three things. It'll involve a joint tender pack, establishing 2 separate contracts with the appointed shipyard for the delivery of 3 CMAL vessels and 1 Highland Council vessel as part of SVRP Phase 2. So also included in this work will be the appointment of a specialist lawyer called Adershaw Goddard, and we're meeting with them this Friday with CMAL, and we've been working closely with our procurement team. So the second element of that would be putting in place a support service contract with CMAL to obtain their assistance and guidance through the build and delivery process of the ship. And thirdly, the council will be looking to appoint a client representative to represent the best interests of the Highland Council during the build and delivery process. So the logic is that this arrangement will enable Highland Council to manage the project while also benefiting from CMAL's technical expertise, the economies of scale, site supervision, and key in all of this is ensuring the vessel standardisation and interchangeability. So, for example, you have 10 CMAL vessels and 1 Highland Council vessel, all similar designs, similar propulsion, similar batteries, and that'll be standardised across the Chief's network as part of the small vessels replacement programme. So it's important to note that the small vessels replacement phase 2 is a separate procurement exercise from phase 1. It's planned as part of the Transport Scotland's Island Connectivities Plan, but the realisation of this phase is still to get approval from Scottish ministers, but is part of the overall. So the SVPR phase 1 procurement, as you may already know, is already been awarded to a shipyard in Poland called Remontoa. Unfortunately, we didn't have the funding in place to be part of phase 1, so we're now aiming for phase 2. So although phase 2 is, the second phase, it's still aimed to run alongside phase 1 and finish at approximately the same time. So the bottom line is it's anticipated that the new Corran vessel will be the first of 4 vessels as part of SVPR phase 2, with an estimated delivery date at the end of 2028-29. And that's where we are. So in relation to the funding, as part of the Inverness Highlands City Region deal, we've put in a request to the government to extend that deal beyond the March 2027 date to align with the estimated spend profile timeline of the new vessel. So I'm happy to take any questions on that at the end, but I know that my colleague Andrew McKeever is on the call, who will follow on and give you an update on the infrastructure. So thanks for that.
Yep. Good morning, Andrew, and thanks.
Good morning, Chair. So just obviously the report is in front of you, the Corran Ferry Infrastructure Improvement Scheme update. Just to add to it that the consultation process has been completed for the planning application and marine licence applications, and representations have been received. So we'll be looking to review these and consider them, and obviously provide any additional information that might be required and pass that to the planning case officer for their consideration. In terms of the infrastructure design and the procurement, we've received the finalised detailed design drawings and documents from our consulting engineers. So we're just currently reviewing these, and the tender issue is likely to be pushed back just a couple of weeks to the start of June. However, the tender period will reduce by 2 weeks, so still programmed for that tenders to be returned in September 25, with construction commencing in November 25, and it's a proposed 18-month construction period, so completion in May 27. So from me, thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So does anyone have any questions for Richard, Murray, or Andrew? Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I have some operational questions for Richard, if that is fine. So there's been some media comment over the last few days based on today's committee report about a request to Transport Scotland to increase our ring-fenced grant funding for internal ferry services. We currently get, from memory, around £1 million a year, and we're asking for £1.5 million. Can you remind me, Richard, how many times over the last 5 years we've requested an increase in a grant, and how many times Transport Scotland has agreed to that grant increase? Second question is, I asked a question at the last area committee about plans to increase ferry fares. So can you tell me when the decision was made before the budget papers were published to increase ferry fares on the Corran ferry by 10%? Why there was no discussion with ward members beforehand, and why was the prior consultation with affected communities, which was the established practice in the past when there were fare increases proposed above the rate of inflation, when was that decided not to proceed? And can you tell me about the proposed £3 walk-on pedestrian fare, which was included, according to Malcolm MacLeod, and my questions, as part of the increased revenue package as agreed by councillors at the March budget meeting? How is that going to work? And maybe you can tell us how many foot passengers are there every year on the ferry, and how much that £3 single walk-on charge is going to raise, and whether that will also be coming, as indicated by Councillor Gowans at the budget meeting, to the next meeting of the appropriate committee for us to approve. In terms of smart ticketing, how long has this project been a priority now? I seem to recall that it probably predates 2018, Richard, and I've been asking you this question at numerous area committees ever since. When would you think that we will actually see smart ticketing approved and actually implemented on the Corran ferry? I note what you said about trying to get the funding package together for the crew transfer boat. Can you tell me, tell members how much council headquarters has committed towards that project, and the total amount that they've confirmed? And also, finally, my last question is about your comments about marshalling and the fact that we now have marshals in place, but your report only mentions Ardgour marshalling. Can you confirm that when needed, that there will be a marshal placed on the Corran side, albeit maybe less often than on the Ardgour side, because there are occurrences, as you know, where we are seeing a backup onto the A82 quite often. That is a result of vehicles being left in lane 1 and parked there for the day whilst people have gone across on the ferry, and that tends to be tradespeople's vans that must hop into a colleague's work van and head across to the peninsula, and that means that people are not using lane 1 on the Corran side, and we're seeing occasional backup onto the A82 and the subsequent safety hazard as a result. So quite a long list of operational questions there for you, Richard.
Thanks, Andrew. Hand over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Baxter. Yes, quite a long list. I'm just checking to see that we have a clerk. So hopefully they've captured all of those questions. So I think I've jotted them down as you were going, so I can try and answer some of them. But if I can't answer them all, then obviously we'll have to revert back with answers to those questions after the committee. So probably going in reverse order. But the marshals, just to confirm that the marshal, I noticed that myself in the, it's a slight typo, I guess, in the report, because it just mentions Ardgour, but the marshals are actually on both sides. And in fact, we tend to have 2 on at once, sometimes 1 on each side. Sometimes they're both on the same side. So obviously they can cross over and go to wherever it's needed, because often it's busy on one side. For example, you know, everybody going across the peninsula in the morning, and then it can be quieter on that side. In the evening, it's busy on the other side as everybody back across to the Fort William side. So just to give you reassurance on that one. Transport Scotland, Rather than just answer that off the top of my head, which I probably could, I'd want to check that before I give you an answer back on that one. To get that wrong. The crew transport boat currently, as it is an active project, and we're funding is the issue. We have a design, but funding is the issue. So that is an active project. Currently, there's zero funding against that project. Smart ticketing again requires resource. This is something a lot of work's been done in the background. You've seen the results of that, but there's been a full appraisal done over the period that you've been talking about, and it keeps coming down to resource. Again, there's zero resource against that project to take it forward. So that's something that we're pushing hard on in the background to try and realise that, so that we can take that forward to the next level. Obviously, in that time though, that you talked about, we have a new ticketing system now that's fully functioning. So that's a massive step forward from the old equipment and the old system that we have. Yes, I think that probably covers everything I'm able to answer off the top of my head, but is there anything you want to press me on that I've missed right now? Otherwise, I can respond back to you after this meeting.
Thank you, Richard. Could you tell us about community consultation on ferry fares increases? The previous agreement was that affected communities would be consulted about any proposed ferry fare increases above the rate of inflation before they occurred, and also Lochaber area members would as well before budget papers were issued. Why is that no longer the case? And can you please comment on the proposed walk-on pedestrian fare charges that Malcolm MacLeod has indicated was £3 per individual to walk on the Corran Ferry, and when that will be presented to committee to approve?
Okay, thanks for reminding me that. So the foot passenger, there is a proposal for a foot passenger fare, and that went to the budget committee along with the 10% fares increase. But the foot passenger element was deferred to the E&I committee, which is at the end of May. In terms of consultation, I think I'll have to report back to you on that, because obviously there was, yeah, as you say, the ferry increase was introduced as part of the overall budget package. In terms of more localised consultation, that's raising that as an issue, so that's something we can give you a formal response on that, I guess. Quite happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, and to note, obviously, personally, to note for future reference as regards to future Lochaber Ward business meetings and area committee.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just seek a point of clarification on an answer that Richard provided there? So in a response to my question about foot passenger fares, you said that a proposal for a foot passenger fare on the ferry went to the budget committee and then that was deferred to the E&I. Did you mean to say budget committee? And if so, what budget committee is that? Is that of officers or is that of senior administration and members?
Sorry, maybe getting my committee names incorrect, but the full Highland Council meeting that set the budget for the next 3 years.
But it would have been discussed with administration members before it was presented to full council?
That's something I would not have been involved with, so I'm struggling to answer that. I'm sorry.
But thank you for the clarification. I thought you meant full council rather than a committee. That's much appreciated. Thank you.
Andrew and Richard. Has anyone else got any questions? I've got a question again in relation to the slipway repairs. So I assume these repairs are anticipated that they will then, that will be the final repairs needed until all the new infrastructure is in place. Would that be correct? Are you hoping that won't be further repairs needed after the next round?
Yeah, it's hard to say because obviously it's aging infrastructure. This repair that we're doing so I couldn't say I categorically agree with that. There may be, you know, depending on what weather we have, what winters we have, what storms we experience. This repair to the Lochaber slipway is a surface repair. It's sort of wear and tear to the concrete surface around the joints, and to all intents and purposes, it looks like potholing, but you tend not to call it a pothole on a concrete surface. And so it's a screed type product that's involved in that repair. There's also an edge beam repair that requires to be done on that same slipway. There's also repairs required to the Ardgour slipway, which are planned to be programmed as soon as possible after this one, this summer too. Again, overnight to avoid disruption. And that's a slightly different issue. It's again, it's a deterioration of the concrete and around a joint where there's a steel plate near the toe of the slipway on the slab, the surface slab. So that's a different type of repair. And also the steel edge plate that we have on the Ardgour slipway, that's held down by bolts, so that they require some attention as well. So these are some of that is what you call ongoing maintenance. So I can see us having to do that again. Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I think the questions will be for Andrew and Murray. Just a clarification in terms of dates. So I hear delivery of the vessel end of year, end of 2028, and completion of the infrastructure summer 2027. Can we assume that whether it's the infrastructure or the vessel, that then they will be immediately operational, or is there still more time to wait once infrastructure is completed and the vessel is delivered?
Yeah, I'll let Andrew come in on the infrastructure first. Infrastructure first, then vessel, I think.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. The intention is that the construction will be complete in May 27.
And will it be operational immediately, or is there a transition, or?
Yeah, the expectation would be that on construction completion, that that new infrastructure will become operational immediately. Yeah.
Okay. And same for the vessel, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's worth as well just reminding the members that there'll be some slight ramp adjustments to the existing vessel, the MV Corran, so that'll be able to operate off the new infrastructure, off the new slipways.
Thanks, Murray. Will that adjustment be able to be done on site, or will the ferry have to go away to be adjusted?
So it'll be done as part of the refit. These minor ramp adjustments will be done when it goes away to refit.
Okay, yep. Thanks, Murray. Do we have any other questions? I think so Richard's got a few things to come back with from Andrew's questions, I think. But thanks very much for that report. And we as asked, noted the updates in the report. And thank you very much for your time. Morning.
Pleasure. Thank you, Chair. Members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Have a good day. So moving on to item 7, the housing management performance report. We're being asked to note the information provided, housing performance from April 24 to end of March 2025. And thank you, Elaine, for joining us this morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I think I've met most of you at some capacity now, but I'm Elaine Wilkinson, Principal Housing Officer for Lochaber. It's all quite positive from the report in front of you. The first table that I'll touch on is obviously the rent arrears over the course of the year. And what I would suggest is it's worth noting Q4 last year compared to the end of Q4 this year. Whilst there's some fluctuations, overall it's been a successful year with 50,000 being taken off the revenue account and debt in Lochaber. So the team have been working very hard to maintain that. And it's probably worth noting as well that we've, over the year and more recently, we've had quite a lot of new builds come on. So obviously the levels of debt that we expect to see probably rise, but we've still managed to buck the trend and bring it down overall. So it's testament to the hard work and the early intervention that the team have been doing. Table 2, again, there you can see overall as a Lochaber combined, we are sat quite well below the Highland average, so we're pleased with that. There are, there's the variation between the two wards, various different reasons in the background. Cool and Malik seems to be a slightly more settled area with not quite the same turnover of stock, and quite often with high turnover, we are always going to see slightly more chaotic accounts and things. So we just work to try and manage that. But overall, we are below the average there. Table 3 highlights probably what we're going to be focusing on as a team next, and it's going to be the early intervention of low-level rent accounts. At the moment, you can see we're sat with about 350 that are under £500. So our take is if we can really get in there early and support people at that stage of their tenancy, hopefully stop escalation and moving on to the higher level and the more serious actions that we take around rent recovery. The focus for the last few months has really been on the higher end accounts to bring them down. So we'll be still working with them, but trying to focus on the lower ones to stop that escalation. I don't know if anyone's got questions as you go or beyond at the end.
I think we're happy to wait till the end of next, Elaine.
Perfect. Still linked in with the rents. Obviously, we're quite pleased that we've had very low level of evictions. The team are, we see our sole purpose as really there to sustain the tenancies and make sure that we don't get to eviction stage. So over the course of the year, we've only had the 2 evictions, where all other actions that we've tried to take have failed, and that's been the final outcome. Part of this we probably look at is that you'll see in Q2 there was we did a lot of work and we issued a lot of notices, and we really focused on getting in that. It's a tool essentially. So by using it and letting people know that we wanted to work with them, but we were also serious about collecting in the rent, it has stopped the rise in debt, and we found that tenants are engaging with us, and obviously we're saving it long before it gets to the eviction stages. Table 5 in the next section is about antisocial behaviour. We've done some work on the table here, so the total is we've had 13 cases reported to us over the course of the year. I'm sure you'll be aware that we've had some high profile cases that we have worked on. They don't always class as antisocial behaviour, although we still support the communities where these incidents are happening, with more getting out on the patch, face-to-face door knocks, just checking in with our tenants to make sure that they feel supported by housing as well. in the background, there's been quite a lot of training on antisocial behaviour for the team across the Highlands, not just in Lochaber. So we expect to see we'll be taking more robust actions, and again, grassroots, getting in the communities, talking to people. Some of these cases are very, very time consuming, and quite often they can go on for a long time because they can die down, and then just when you think perhaps that's the end, things start to ramp up a little bit. So cases, we don't always close them as soon as we've spoken to somebody. We do let them keep going, and we monitor as much as possible just to make sure we get the best outcomes for people. The next section is with relating to the homelessness across Lochaber and the Highlands. So table 6 shows that we're quite level in the presentations that we have as homeless. So in Q4 across the Highlands there was almost 300, and we had 28. So I guess 10% of cases. We've got some very experienced staff who work in many cases to try and prevent people ever becoming homeless. So whilst there's 28 cases, there's a lot of work with people to look at other options for them and to support them into any other tenancy or option for them. The time that people spend in our TFAs, we've got 44 at the moment, temporary units across Lochaber. So sometimes, depending on the needs, people can be in there for quite several months. And if we can, we'll get people into a secure option as quickly as possible. And we're currently looking at measures to try and speed that up when somebody gets an offer, that we can help them move in quickly, and then we can have anybody else that's waiting for TFA move in quicker. Sorry. With regards to that, so obviously there's a lot of policy around what we can do and who the allocations go to as well. And there's been, oh sorry, I've jumped a table, so forgive me. The table 8 talks on what we're short of in Lochaber essentially, and the housing need is definitely indicating that we need more 1-bed properties. That is, we've got 81 on the last quarter on the list, so we are always looking at options to try and pull back any 1-beds we've got. If people need to move on into 2 beds, we'll support that to try and to be able to reach people with the 1-beds. That's definitely where the demand is. In terms of the number of allocations, it's quite standard. We've had 44% of allocations go to homeless applicants. Having a look at that, all of those allocations in the last quarter had need to reside points. So it's folk who have got the connection to the community. They work here, they're at school, they've got care needs here. So overall, quite positive. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions for me.
Thanks very much for the report and your summary of it, Elaine. Has anyone got any questions? Sarah?
Thank you. Good morning, Elaine. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Just 2 questions, but before that, I'll say exactly the same thing as I said to the roads department earlier. Your engagement with communities, and particularly the walkabouts recently, have been greatly appreciated. So let's carry on.
Okay. Yes.
2 things. Antisocial behaviour. Is there a way for people who are the victims of antisocial behaviour to know how to report it quickly, because they tend to come to the council, they don't know who to talk to? That's the first question. And the other one was homelessness. When people are homeless, obviously you try to go for a house as soon as possible where there is accommodation available. Here in Lochaber, they end up actually being in places which are away from Fort William, where employment tends to be. So that means they're then stuck in a vicious circle. They find a home, but then they cannot find employment. And are there ways around that? Because I know that Fort William is pretty full in terms of when you're looking for accommodation, compared with it's easier to find accommodation perhaps in other parts of Lochaber. Where are we on this?
Yes, we are I'll go with the last question first. Obviously, I touched on that we've got 44 TFAs for the emergency side of things. We've got some new stock coming on, so we're going to be looking to use them for TFAs in the short term, just to support people who do need to be in Lochaber, because as you say, some of the outlying areas, we do have stock there, and people tend to, if we can, we sometimes have to use them just because of the nature of the emergency. Within the policy, but we do look at each case individually, and we will work and look at all different options to try and get people into accommodation in areas they want. I'm thinking of cases currently, you know, we do have people that want to move out of Fort William. So in the background, we're looking at cases where people do have a Fort William address, but they want to move out, and in turn, giving us a stock back in the areas that are higher demand. I can't say it's going to be an easy fix. I think it will take some time, and there's perhaps never going to be, you know, 100% solution there. But we're just really working to make sure that we're using the best of our stock to where it needs to be, and looking at every case by case. And we will always try to accommodate people with what they want at the time, which can change. Don't know if that answered your question, or if you want further clarity.
Thank you.
In regards to the ASB, the first port of call, if the person is aware of who the officer is for that area, that would always be the first suggestion. But if not, just by contacting the business, the service point, the business support, they can be the first point of contact, whether it be in person at the service point or on the phone, and that can get the ball rolling, taking some basic details, and then the officer for that area would contact whoever. But again, if they come to you, just pop anyone through to us, and we'll happily pick up any ASB cases as they come in.
Is there the ability to pick up, you know, if something is really urgent, out of hours, etc.? I presume they can be picked up quickly.
If it's out of hours, we'd always suggest that it has to go via the police. If anything is that level, that would be the first. Then the police quite often will come to us as well and discuss cases. But you know, where the service we provide is 9 to 5, so if they're looking to speak to somebody on a particular day, they should always be able to get hold of somebody in the team. Whether it's that patch officer, there'll always be somebody available who can give immediate advice. But if it is a very urgent case, we would always suggest the police are the first port of call, and then phone us.
Yep, thanks for that, Elaine. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. We have, we've noted, and thank you very much for the report. Thanks for joining us, and have a good afternoon.
You too. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So item 8 is environmental health annual report and activity, and I think we've got John Murray who's joined us online. Thanks very much for joining us, John, and for the report. Hand over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. If it's okay, I'll just share my screen at the moment, and I can go through a brief presentation just of the key points in the report. Is that coming through okay for you guys?
Yes, yep, that's good. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. The report was on the back of the Environmental Health Operational Plan, which was designed to outline the objectives for the whole of the Environmental Health team, including the priorities. One of the key commitments that came out of that report was to provide reports such as this to the local area committees. And the aim of that was to try and increase the awareness of the type of work and activities that are conducted by Environmental Health, and also provide an opportunity for seeking feedback on the work that's being carried out and any local issues that you wish to see prioritised. So the duties of environment health are very wide, broad-reaching. A lot of the work undertaken is proactive and preventative, such as food safety inspections. The remit overall is to protect and improve public health for Highland. We aim to support local businesses, and we look to do that by providing advice and ensure any regulatory activity that we're having to pursue is proportionate, consistent, accountable and transparent and targeted. And the enforcement approach that we use is in line with the 4 E's that you'll typically see in a lot of enforcement type stuff, which is engage, explain, encourage and enforce. And a lot of the times we tend to find that because Lochaber is such a small and tight-knit community, we normally only go through the first 3 enforcements, not something that we tend to get heavily embroiled in, just simply because the vast majority of businesses that we're dealing with are not willfully trying to break the law, and they're just maybe not realising what's expected of them. So the core element is, like I say, to assist these businesses with compliance. Now, the operational areas for environmental health are split into 3 areas, north, mid and west. And on the diagram there, the kind of peach coloured is where we are at the moment. Now, the west team is managed by myself. It's 1 senior in our office. And there are 2 area offices within this team. So we've got Charles Kennedy down in Fort William, and we've also got the Portree depot up in Broome Place. And the officers, although in separate offices, they'll work across the team as each West deliver in both areas. So you might see some of the casework dealings. You might be introduced to some of our officers in the Sky office, just because we operate as an entire team. So moving on to the general activity, we're going to be looking at the last financial year. Within that report, it's been split into 3 main areas. And that's to look at the reactive work we get involved in, the proactive work and the formal enforcement activity. And again, like I said, the figures are relating to 1st of April from last year to 31st of March this year. And again, the figures are tailored just for the Lochaber Area Committee, so covering wards 11 and 12. Now, the reactive work that we receive will go into our case management system. We have a product that we call Civic APP. It's sometimes known as Flare. And what we do is every inquiry we receive gets logged on that system. We'll be given a service request reference number. And there's a breakdown by the different types of complaints we receive in Appendix 2 of the report. Now, the number of service requests received by Environment Health for the Lochaber area is just under 2,300 for that time frame. And that's looking around 14% of the entirety of Environment Health service requests for that time frame. And it's slightly up from the previous year. A couple of charts here just showing what that increase looks like. So that's the last 5 years, and you'll see from 22 onwards, there's quite a significant uptick. Now, that is primarily due to the short-term licensing regime that was introduced just at the back end of 2021, and that's had quite a significant uptick. And if I just show you the next chart, that's just removing those short-term lets. You can see there's just quite a significant uptick in terms of those numbers coming in, and that's putting quite a bit of workload onto the team. And a bit of good news and direct response to that increased work. Environment Health has been lucky enough to get some additional resourcing, and we have 2 dedicated officers in each of the 2 area offices within the East West. So we've got 2 in Fort William and 2 in Skye. One of those posts is yet to be filled. So although there is quite a significant increase in the sheer volume of work coming in, we have received a corresponding resource to match that. So there's a no net increase, which is beneficial. A lot of the times, Environment Health get additional workload coming our way, typically from the Scottish Government, and there's not the corresponding support in terms of additional resource. So a bit of a good news story there in terms of the short-term lets. In the following table, again, this is in the report, it's just a quick oversight of the range of work that we do and the typical numbers that are coming in. You can see there's quite a broad breadth of different topics and type of inquiries that we do receive. And these are grouped upper headings. Some of these headings themselves will have maybe say 12, 13, 14 different subheadings. So it's just, we do find ourselves going across the entire breadth of environmental health. And one of the things that the rural officers tend to have that some of the more centralised offices don't experience is just the fact that as individual HOs, they'll be required to respond to anything in that entire remit at some stage or another. Often with some of the more centralised offices with increased bodies, there's a functionality where you can go into more specialist roles, which sometimes makes the tasks a little bit easier. Moving on to the proactive programme work, it pretty much lands into two specific areas, and we'll be looking at food and private water supplies. Lochaber's got some of the highest numbers of private water supplies across the whole of Highland, and along with the food safety, although the numbers there are representative for the Lochaber area compared to other segments. One element that has come in is a modified inspection regime for approved establishments, and that's sort of skewed these figures whereby the work now takes a lot more time, and of the 80 approved establishments in the Highland area, something like 25 of them rest within Lochaber. So that's a significant increase in resource demand, and unfortunately in this issue we haven't received a corresponding uptick in resource, so it is proving challenging. And the last and third element of the report talked about enforcement activity. Oh, sorry, I'm having conflicting issues here with my presentation. Starting to stick. The enforcement activity, like I explained before, we don't have a lot of enforcement in the Lochaber area. We are quite fortunate. It's a real, genuine sense of local community, and there's more of a collaborative approach with a lot of the elements. Again, most of the businesses aren't willfully trying to break the law, and once they understand the direction they should be heading in, they're normally on board. There is on that table there Regulation 27 and detention notice. That was in direct correspondence to a batch of venison that was seized, just over half a tonne's worth of product that was not produced in accordance with the regulations. And we had to seize that. That was destined for high-class restaurants in London and even in France as well. So some of the work, although we do have a local input, some of the impact can be national or international in the products that we are trying to safeguard. So just to raise a couple of things on the local matters, we do have, as I explained earlier, with this new regime that was implemented by Food Standards Scotland. It's called OCV, it stands for Official Control Verification. Where this differs, before we would be going into premises based on a scoring, and it would spit out an inspection date. We go back out in that time frame, and typically for some of these approved establishments, you might be 3, maybe 4 hours between visits and associated admin. The resource calculation that they use now sort of gives an estimated amount of time you should be allocating for this. And for some of the premises where we would be in these maybe once every 2 years, we'll perhaps be in there 3 and 4 times in a single year. So we're starting to see a near tenfold increase in the hours required to process some of these. And as explained earlier, we have significant numbers of these establishments in the Lochaber area. We only have 1.6 full-time equivalent EHOs at the moment, and half of their time is dedicated to food. So we've less than one full-time officer trying to process all this food work. So it's proving very challenging, but it's not unique to Highland Council. This OCV process is having quite a significant impact across the whole of Scotland. All local authorities are currently in the process of working with Food Standards Scotland to try and generate figures demonstrate just the deficit all local authorities are experiencing to try and deliver on these official food controls. Another local matter I was going to mention today is just the abandoned vehicles. A significant number of reports coming in. We had about 100 and odd last year. The procedures that we have at the moment are currently centrally under review. We're trying to increase cost recovery for some of the vehicles that we're having to remove forcefully. There's been work late 2024 in terms of improving the data capture. It makes it much easier to try and analyse the data to figure out where these problems are arising in terms of location, and even if there is perhaps a few or individuals rather than a broad brush mass disposal of vehicles. There's also broader work on a pilot for TROs and another part of the Highland Councils in terms of abandoned vehicles, which are more classed as nuisance vehicles affecting housing land. And just leading on to the wider Highland Council issues, there's proposals for new animal licensing to be brought in for many years now. Dog breeding, dog boarding, these have been well licensed and looked after, but there has been concerns about dog walking, grooming and livery services where these go unchecked, and there are concerns. So there's moves to bring that in, and Highland Council are liaising with the Scottish Government in terms of passing back comments to try and shape some of the legislation that's coming out. The other major element that may be emerging in the next coming months is this regulation of non-surgical procedures. So this is like cosmetic procedures, basically anything that's injected into the skin or anything that's capable of penetrating under the epidermis, and it also includes application of light, electricity, cold or heat. So all these beauty services in the central belt, a lot of these are quite prominent. They'll have high street shops and outlets. Whereas in the rural locations, a lot of this activity takes place on the social media, so like Facebook, and it makes it a little bit more challenging to tie these ones down. This is in the process of going through consultation with the Scottish Government, but like most of the other tattooing licensing elements, although it will be applied through licensing through civic government, the consultation process and the enforcement of these conditions is most likely to come back to environmental health. So another significant piece of work that may come our way, and again, unfortunately, without corresponding resource. That's a very short whistle-stop tour of just the report itself. That pretty much concludes my presentation. Members are asked to note and provide any feedback on the range and volume of work that we're undertaking, the Highland-wide issues, and the report format and any content. That concludes everything I've got to present today, and I would welcome any questions.
Thanks very much for that, John. Yeah, a lot that you and the team have to cover. Thanks for the report. I think Sarah has got a question as a start.
Good morning, and thank you, John.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed, a lot of work you have to do. Thank you. A question about abandoned cars. What do we have in place when perhaps the car is not exactly abandoned, but looks abandoned because the owner, for sorts of reasons, cannot afford to maintain it, and it's been there for a long time, and that person will not be able to do anything about it, to have it removed because of the costs involved? What can we do to... Also, I can see the pressure is putting on somebody who's already struggling. How can we help the car owners to resolve that situation?
The first thing is to try and establish that it's been abandoned. Now, again, that term gets thrown about quite a bit, and what we're looking for is the abandonment is basically enforced under the Refuse Amenities Act. So looking at vehicles that are just waste, nobody's coming back for them. If these are vehicles that are getting worked on, people are trying to retain them, and they're just waiting to try and get finances together to get the car maybe road legal or put it through an MOT. It's not necessarily abandoned, but it may be stored in a place that perhaps nearby residents don't want it. This is one of the biggest problems with the housing car parks. So the car might be on council land, it might be SORNed or might be taxed or not, but the car's just sitting there and appears not to be getting used. That's not necessarily abandoned. If somebody is trying to get rid of the vehicle, what we try and do is signpost them to recovery services. There's quite a number of facilities, normally online, where you would put in the details of the car, and these companies will come and collect the vehicle. And in some instances, depending on the condition or the age of the vehicle, the person may get money for the scrappage of the vehicle, or at the very least, perhaps get it removed for free. So there are options out there. So we do a bit of signposting to people in the first instance if they're trying to get rid of the vehicle. But quite often we're finding that people want to keep the vehicle, and that's where it gets a wee bit difficult, because the residents and perhaps the council housing departments don't want these cars where they're being kept. But that doesn't mean to say necessarily that an offence has been committed and that you can take it forcefully. So I don't know if that helps.
Thanks, John. I guess question certainly in this around Lochaber, there are a few, certainly after the storms last winter and going backwards. There are now various yachts, boats, etc., washed up on the shoreline that have just been abandoned. Does that come under your remit, or what happens with these vessels that are just left above the high tide, well, below the high tide mark, but above?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a little bit different. The Amenities Act talks about any car or vehicle or trailer being brought to a place for the purpose of disposal. If it's storm damaged material that's sort of washed up on the shore, it gets a little bit difficult. In terms of oversight, in terms of scope of enforcement, I'm not entirely sure how Environment Health would have anything over the marine vessels. There may be parallel issues about pollution, but that would fall to SEPA. But it's something I can look into. I don't think it's going to be Environment Health, but we could definitely try and find an agency that may have oversight on that. I'm trying to think that perhaps maybe Maritime Coast Guard Agency might have input in terms of the suitability and seafaring of seagoing vessels.
But certainly there are a couple, and certainly at least one yacht, possibly more, that are now just sitting on the shoreline after storms last winter. That would just what the procedure is would be useful to know. Sarah, did you?
Just one more thing, since we're talking about Lochaber particularly, there's also litter underwater, particularly near the West End car park. Does it come under your remit to basically stop people from throwing things in the water? And is there a possibility of doing a cleanup operation with volunteers? And also, is there a possibility of doing some signage in spots where people are likely to do all sorts of things?
Yeah, so there's a bit of dual input there. So in terms of the first issue, the commission of the offence, so any litter that's getting done, then that's something that Environment Health would be able to enforce. Sometimes it gets a wee bit tricky trying to catch people in the act. The second element, in terms of the clean up and signage, that may need input from a waste department. We wouldn't have, Environment Health doesn't have personnel to do the clean up side of things. In terms of the signage, we might have to speak to waste. I think they put them up in other areas, but we may also have to engage the parking attendants in terms of access to the car park itself. I think this is just all at the West End.
Didn't hear that.
Was that not just the West End? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was going to say, is all the litter predominantly at the West End, or are there other areas that are affected?
The West End car park where people go white swimming. I mean, I've been in the shallows. I've dived down in the shallows. I was absolutely shocked by what I saw.
Yeah. You know what? That's not a problem. We can take that away. Again, this is the whole reason for trying to do these reports, is to try and get this feedback so that we can focus some of our resources. So in terms of litter patrols, we can look at trying to conduct them and just have like a short-term monitoring exercise round about the West End car park, and I can speak to my colleagues in waste to see about signage that's been done in the past. And again, I can check in with Shane Manning for the parking enforcement, because I know that they're doing some work already on the West End car park, if they have insight as to where we could maybe perhaps put some signage up. That was an option.
And don't forget to do some tidying up. That you don't need to employ professionals. There are dive clubs in the Highlands And I know that Inverness a few years ago used the volunteers from the Inverness Dive Club to clean the River Ness, and also it was an opportunity to raise awareness of what people actually throw in the water. Just
Yeah.
Feel free to speak to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John. Thomas.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to bring it up, John, but we get a lot of correspondence about it. The Sawmill, Acha football. Where are we with this issue? Is excessive noise being confirmed? I asked for a summary of that report that we got that we could discuss with the community. I don't seem to have ever received it, but where exactly are we? We've received reports recently that the noise is excessive during the night. Can we confirm that? But basically, I want an update of where exactly we are with this issue.
Yeah, no, I can. Firstly, apologies for not being able to get that summary produced. I can get that done within the next couple of days and add on to it the additional work that was done in April. So we had unmanned monitoring that highlighted. I've got to be careful what I say here because a lot of the information hasn't been handed back to the clients, and obviously it's not in the public domain just yet. But in terms of the time frame, we've had a few anomalies identified with the unmanned monitoring. The difficulty we had there is there was no way to ascertain what was causing those. So we had a further 3 instances of in-person monitoring, and 2 of them were around midnight at separate weeks in April. So we had 2 officers, myself and another out, taking readings. So what I'll do is we're in the process of compiling those manned results and pulling that together. But what I can do in the interim period is get that summary to you for a fuller overview of the time frame where we're at and when we're likely to be able to give a response back, if that helps.
Thanks, Thomas, and thanks, John. If that could come to all the Ward 21 councillors, that would be good. Thanks, John. So I think that no other questions. So yeah, thank you for a comprehensive report. As you highlighted, note the contents. Thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Item 9, where members are invited to note the following ward discretionary funds have been granted since the last committee meeting. And then item 10, noting the minutes of the last committee meeting, which was held in January and approved by council in March. So that concludes the May Lochaber area committee meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.